This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. So the province of British Columbia sells off a very valuable piece of property right in the center of the city, and then it sits there basically for 10 years doing nothing. Now let's look at the wonderful deal they did. They give this to a private developer who promises the world, and meanwhile they move over 200 families who've been happily living in this little community for many, many years, people with limited incomes, and they're in a very comfortable, wonderful location at 37th and Main, right near Queen Elizabeth Park. And they have to all be relocated and dislocated, and their lives are thrown into turmoil and so on. But there are promises that all of this will be replaced very soon. Well, the developer doesn't do that, and his excuse at his latest public statement is, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm building the Trump Tower downtown." I wonder if Mr. Trump would be interested in learning any of this, or if he cares. Our guest cares a lot. His name is Growe, and he's with C.A.L.M, the Community Advocates for Little Mountain. Hello, Barry. So have you lived in the complex? Were you a neighbor?
I'm a neighbor. I live about 2.5 blocks away.
Yeah. So tell us your sense of this and your sense of the history of this.
Well, it's incomprehensible to those of us who have worked on this for 8-9 years that the government did this to people. As far as eight years ago, they told people that the site was going to be redeveloped and that they were to move out, and that they would be found other places within the BC housing system. So people started moving out, and in 2009, the entire place was demolished, with the exception of one building, because there were 4 families that refused to move, and so they were housed in one building, and the rest of the 17 acres was leveled.
Yes.
And as you say, promises were made, and this was all going to be great. People could move back if they wanted to. Maybe most important of all, though, the promise was that because the housing was going to be replaced, the 600 people who were moved farther down the enormous BC housing waiting list would rise again because there'd be new places.
Yes.
Never happened.
What do you mean it never happened? They didn't get priority positioning?
The people in Little Mountain did get priority positioning and did get places.
Yes.
And 600 other people at the bottom of the BC housing list got even more delayed. And it's already a 3 to 4 year waiting list.
Wow.
And they were delayed even more. And we're talking about families with kids. We're talking about seniors. We're talking about disabled people.
Yeah, of course.
And that's a tremendous number of people right in the midst of a housing crisis.
You know, Barry, it's very interesting. For those of us who have by and large been able to pay our own way in life, we can be pretty arrogant and pretty comfortable. And we forget that for people who struggle and for people who have limited incomes, to have this roof over your head that's your home for 10 or more years and suddenly be told, sorry, you're gone. I mean, how traumatic is that? How upsetting is that?
How upsetting would it be to you or me?
Yes, very.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think needs to be monetized by government before they do these incomprehensible things is the monetary value of community. Yes. So this ribbon cutting that occurred about a month ago, There was a comment made by one of the speakers that it was the rebirth of a community.
That speaker was Vancouver City Councillor Kerry Jang, who has his hand on a lot of housing issues. And here's his quote. He said, "The rebirth of a neighborhood, the rebirth of an area. I know it's been a long time coming, but we're finally here, and it's moving ahead." He's wrong. It is not moving ahead.
They've replaced less than a quarter of the residences that they destroyed by building this one new building.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's let the folks see exactly what we're talking about. So first we're going to see a photograph of the empty property, because I went down there, because there you go, because I play tennis at QE Park and have for many, many years. So that's there you have. It's just a big piece of nothing. It's very pretty, but there's nobody living there. Then you see the sign. And there's the sign saying, "Oh, isn't this exciting? We're going to have this development." But that sign is weathering away because it's been sitting there for years doing nothing, right? Then we see another shot of there's the property as I moved further south. And then finally, I wasn't sure what these two buildings were, but now I gather this is the new beginning of 54 units, right? These two photographs, this one and the next one. Yeah, is that what it is? That's part of the development, but it's the only part that's opened.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the rest of it is a home for weeds.
Yes.
I'm surprised that they didn't tell us from the podium during the ribbon cutting.
Yes.
That they had to destroy the village in order to save it, because that's essentially what they've done. And so if you think about people who are on low incomes, they're usually very resourceful. They have to be resourceful. So what they do is, where they live, they develop networks. So there's, if they've got a car from 1985, they find a kid who can repair it.
Yeah.
If they can't walk to the supermarket, they find someone who'll shop for them on those days when they can't go out,
right,
etc. Young parents find people who will babysit for them.
Yes, of course.
That all is a significant amount of financially for them.
Yeah.
And when a government blows up a community like this,
they're cutting all these ties.
It's all gone.
They're severing everything.
Yeah.
There's a social fabric that basically is just tossed in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I have that kind of network on my street.
Yes.
And it's incredibly important to us.
Yes.
And would be for anyone. And then there's the sort of, internal refugee thing of suddenly being told, if you or I were told,
yes,
you're moving, the
month,
city's
3
taking
months,
your place for eminent domain, you're gone. I think we all need to...
Actually, this happened to a very famous Vancouverite, a beloved Vancouverite, the late Chuck Davis, who wrote the Vancouver book, mm-hmm, and so on, and was a newspaper columnist and a CBC speaker when I first met him 50 years ago. Chuck was moved from his home to put up the original SkyTrain. Oh. And I think, as I recall, he didn't feel that he got what he deserved for that piece of property. How much time did people have? How much warning?
Well, they were given 2 years warning.
Okay.
And so some who were not really strongly tied to the community, or were perfectly happy to move in a different place in Vancouver,
yes,
they readily moved early on. In fact, if this had been done properly, once those folks moved, what we asked government over and over again to do was to take the remaining people, the people who had children in school, who had these social networks,
yes,
move them into half of the complex, demolish what was left, rebuild promptly, and then move them in.
Wouldn't that be a reasonable thing to do? Instead, they just leveled the whole thing,
yes,
and built nothing.
Yes.
Okay, and so we just spend another moment here on that ribbon cutting and that announcement. Rich Coleman, Minister of Housing, was there. Mr. Jang was there. The guy from Holborn Properties was there, and somebody else, I can't remember. Well, they were excoriated in the press. I think Daphne Bramham in the Sun and the people in the Courier. just laughed at this ribbon cutting. And they said, how do these people have the nerve to be there with their smiley political faces on when in fact they've done the community and human beings such a dreadful disservice?
These politicians pride themselves on seemingly two things, excellent fiscal management and first-rate PR. And they have battalions of PR people.
Yeah.
And you really wonder how good either their fiscal management or their PR is when they pull a stunt like this.
Well, you know what my bottom line take on this whole story is? The city and the province were hosed by people who know how to do business, and they were treated, the city and the province were treated like the country bumpkins that they are.
They certainly, the province certainly could have included as a requirement of the developer that the social housing units be built promptly.
Yes, yes. By the way, we should make it clear that what the development company said they would do is put up 1,500 new units, 240 or 50 of which would replace and add maybe 10 more units of social housing, right? But none of that has happened except for this 54 unit. Now, what is this about, and who's moving into it? This thing that finally opened.
It actually opened several months ago.
Okay.
And it's primarily a seniors' residence.
Uh-huh.
So it's a very positive thing. I mean, it's
Yes.
something that is badly needed.
Yes.
And there are about 75 residents, and approximately 15 of them used to live at Little Mountain.
And do you like it? Have you walked through it? Have you looked at any of the units?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it good? Is it good accommodation?
Yeah, it's well built, and it's got a nice community room.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, there's some activities that are regularly held. So I think that side of it is well done.
So aside from the fact that Holborn is busy building a Trump Tower downtown, why has nothing happened? Because let's understand this for sure. There is no plan yet in place. City Hall has not cleared any permits. You still have at least another year of process before anybody could break ground.
Well, you know, businessmen have various imperatives.
Yes.
And if they're given the opportunity to follow any and all imperatives, that's what they'll do.
Yes.
My quarrel is with government, whether it was incompetence or ignorance or indifference, whatever it was, it has left the developer to do what they wish. And that never, ever should have happened when it bears on the lives of hundreds of people who are low income.
And this comes, we're going to just take a quick break, Barry, and this comes from the Families First Premier. We'll take a little break, catch our breath. Happy to hear from you at davidberner.com. And this is an opportunity also for those lovely folks who've been supporting us. How long have we been here? 3.5 years, something like that, 4 years, supporting us all along here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back with Barry Growe in just a moment. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Sun editorialist Daphne Bramham, in her column about this item, in which she says province celebrates a disgrace, that was her headline, talks about 2-bedroom condos now selling on average in this city for $1,800, renting for $1,800 a month. I looked at a very old and shabby a two-bedroom apartment right on my street about 2 weeks ago, just for fun. I was walking home, and I went in just to look at it, and he wanted $2,200 a month. This is not an inexpensive city. Barry, tell us what C.A.L.M, Community Advocates for Little Mountain, who are you, and how did you become so, why are you such good citizens? How did you become so engaged with this issue? Because you don't live there, you live a block or so away.
Well, for me, it came because of a warning that I received just before I moved to my home near Little Mountain.
Yes.
I was living over on Victoria Drive, the first place I lived in Vancouver, back in the early 80s. And I told a neighbor of mine that I was moving to Little Mountain, and he said, oh, have you put the money down? Street gangs. So I thought, street gangs, so I wonder what I've done. So I moved, and then, started walking in and around and through Little Mountain to Queenie Park, and never saw any such thing.
I haven't either. I've played tennis there for the last 30 years.
No, it was a very orderly community, lots of kids, lots of folks around. I thought it was a real asset. My sense, and this is true of my colleagues in C.A.L.M, is that we want to live in an inclusive city, a city that has room for people with all levels of income. Particularly significant in that part of the city because that's where all the hospitals are. There are about 4 of them there, and all the medical offices. Well, the people who cook, who clean, who do all of the basic, relatively low-income jobs in those hospitals, and there are thousands and thousands of them, we need them. Not only does the city need them, the province needs them because those, Women's and Children's Hospital, those are provincial institutions.
Absolutely.
Well, are these folks supposed to
travel?
Commute? 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day to a low-paying job. We need to make room in our city for people who serve the city, and this is an ideal place to do it.
I'm just trying to think, where is that beautiful, relatively new community center? Isn't it on Main Street? And is it on Fraser?
Hillcrest is
No, Hillcrest I know.
Oh, you know that?
I'm thinking the one that's right on a main street, like Main Street. It's a beautiful building. Anyway, I can't remember if it's Main Street or if it's Fraser. No, Hillcrest is spectacular. Yeah, although I have friends who complain about it, but we all complain about everything. So for you, this is just a statement about a sense of what you want your community to be like. Yeah,
it's at a time in the city's history where gentrification is moving east, and we've seen this. We see businesses opening up that are really, they never used to be around. They're a little too upscale for what Main Street used to be, which was a lot of used furniture places. But this has been happening actually for practically 10 years now. And it's some speculation on the part of business owners who think, well, we can see that people can't afford, many of them, to live on the west side. They'll move to the east side, and they'll move around here. And so, the gentrification is coming. What we want is a realistic and lively community that has all kinds of people.
So Barry, what influence, if any, is C.A.L.M having? How do you do your advocacy other than appearing on shows like this? Do you have any voice with the minister or any voice with the city? Do they know that you're beating the drum and asking them to get on with it?
Well, I think they hear the beating of the drum.
Yes.
But I would say that the most significant influence that we've had was after Little Mountain was demolished.
Yes.
What happened was that we were put in contact with a group of tenants at Heather Place,
yes.
which is run not by BC Housing, but by Metro Vancouver Housing.
Oh, okay.
Metro Vancouver is a smaller operation than BC Housing, but they house about 10,000 people around the Lower Mainland.
Heather Place is a nice little operation. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
But aging and needed to be redeveloped.
Yes.
So and this was 3 years ago, Metro Vancouver Housing announced that they were going to redevelop it. They told the tenants that they were going to do exactly what was done at Little Mountain. Exactly. And so I was put in touch with the leaders, the tenants who were the leaders of the group there that felt for a number of different reasons that this was a very poor idea. And so I talked to them about our experience at Little Mountain. They persuaded Metro Vancouver Housing to completely reverse themselves.
Really?
So half of the tenants are still on site. The other half of the homes are empty and are going to be demolished, and then people are going to be able to move in. Maybe most significantly of all, the Metro Vancouver Housing is not selling the land to a developer at all, and that's what they fully intended to do. Instead, what they're doing is they're taking the long view of the public good, and they're going to build market rental housing mixed in with the subsidized housing.
Right.
And over the long term, because of the market rents that they can charge, just like you were saying, the public is going to get the benefit of all that income because they're keeping public lands in public hands.
Which is a model that I think the city, I don't credit them with much, but I think that they can be credited with doing that in many locations. Although today there was the most peculiar article in the press about different doorways. Did you see this?
I have.
Yeah, that the so-called rich door and the poor door, and I thought that's a whole other issue, but I thought it was ludicrous. You know, some people are in market housing and some people are in subsidized housing. It would be nice if everybody became everybody's best friend, but that's not reality. You know. Anyway, here's one of the other issues. Do you believe, and does C.A.L.M believe, that this was just a money grab by the province? This was, okay, here's a fast $300 million, because now what Minister Coleman has announced, without any specifics, is that the so-called profit made here would go towards housing for people with mental health and addictions issues. Now, I'm in the addictions business, and I balked at that. I looked at that and I thought, hey, that's a whole other issue. What are you talking about? You know, if you took money from subsidized housing, then you should keep that investment in subsidized housing. You know,
it does in fact appear that they may want to, the province may be deciding to get out of the subsidized housing business completely.
Altogether.
Yeah. You know, it's presented by Coleman as a zero-sum game.
Yes.
We had to get that money, that $300 million that we got from the developer.
For what?
We had to get it
for what?
So that we could build these places for people who are mentally ill and who have addictions. Now, so he presents it as one or the other.
No.
Absolutely not. They could have done exactly what you and I have been talking about this afternoon. They could still have taken in exactly the same amount of money. They just needed to recognize what the human needs were and make an effort to meet them.
You have a provincial budget. I mean, you take money in from all kinds of sources. How you spend it is a whole other issue. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think one of the reasons I think that we were hosed and that I think of us as rubes is I forgot that legendary New Yorker's name, but the man who built like 1,000 swimming pools, remember, 50, 60 years ago? Well, he was a guy who was a tyrant. He was a city government employee, but he became a famous but beloved tyrant. And he did deals with people all the time. But his deals were, you will get this done by January 3rd, or you won't be in business. Mm-hmm. You know, why don't we have the chutzpah to do that?
Yeah, I mean, of course we need business.
Yes.
Of course we want businessmen to make money.
Yeah, of course.
But we can also place restrictions on them when it's required by the public good. And this government doesn't seem to understand that.
Yeah, to simply give a piece of land and a project to people without some real firm deadlines and some real sets of expectations just doesn't seem like good management. What is your sense now? My read was I said earlier, it'll be at least a year before the city planning department can say, okay, we've got some plans in place, we've got some permits. Do you have any Santa Claus dates for yourself?
Well, I don't. And the fact is that if the developer chooses to have a standoff with the city about demands that the city is making on the developer can just sit on an empty space
forever, for a long time,
making, incidentally, a lot of money. Most
Yes.
of us have to work for our money.
Yes.
But if you have money and you can buy property in central Vancouver, it just keeps up going on up in price, and you don't really have to do anything at all.
We've had this happen a lot with storefronts, where people who own storefronts tell people your rent has doubled, and the coffee shop guy leaves, and this place sits there for 2 years because the owner doesn't care because he's doing nothing but making money.
Yes.
Well, look, Barry, we're out of time. Keep up the good work. Keep making some noise because these folks have to know that this is serious.
We will.
Yeah. Lovely. Thanks so much. Next week, folks, I'm taking a break. I have to do something else on our normal recording day. So we're going to repeat the show with the twin brothers, Duncan and Connor Festemeyer, who don't smoke pot. They're two of the teenagers in the world who don't smoke pot. And they're paying prices for that, for speaking up. So it's a show that got a lot of attention. I got a lot of hate mail. It was wonderful. From potheads who just think I'm a Nazi or something. Good luck. But we will be back the week after. We'll show that one next week. We'll be back with Spencer Chandra Herbert, who is the MLA for the West End downtown, to talk about the Residential Tenancy Act. I'm being told to lower my voice, lower the octave. I have throat problems these days. Folks, so great to have you here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. See you again soon.